Monica, I guess I want to start with the origins of the movie and how it all got started. And I'm curious, when did you first hear Brian Banks' story, and what was the process like of trying to talk him into doing a movie about it?
Well, actually, Amy Bear, my producing partner, heard about Brian's story and contacted him, and then sort of had a moment. Actually, this is her story to tell, but she couldn't be here today. But she went to, in between contacting him and hearing about it, she went and was on a jury. And she actually had a moment where she realized that the person who had been accused of this crime was actually innocent. And she sort of left that jury, situation where he was found innocent, but and went and called and reached out to Brian and got his life rights. And I think because she wanted to make a movie about him and not something that, not a sports movie, not, really just about who he was as a person, she won him over, and Justin. So I came to it after she told me the story, and Shivani Rowett, our other producing partner, the two of us went and met Brian. And as soon as we met him, he's such a light, he's such a beauty, he's such a driving force that there was no way we weren't going to make this movie.
What's your starting point? Do you talk to Brian Banks? Do you start reading everything you can about the case? I mean, I guess even going backwards a little bit, how did you first come on board, and then what were your first steps toward writing the screenplay?
Well, the starting point actually began with this academy because I won a Nickel Fellowship a while back for a script I wrote called Aquila and the Bee.
Yay!
There may be some Nickel Fellows here today. And because of the recognition that I got from the Nickel Fellowship, I was eventually able to get that movie made. And a DVD for that film found its way into the prison cell of Brian Banks. He watched the movie when he was in a very challenging place. And when I met with him, he told me that it gave him hope. And that laid a foundation for us to start building trust and start listening to each other, primarily me listening to him. I conveyed to him a story about somebody very close to me that had gone through something similar to what he'd gone through. And, Brian's a producer on the movie with Monica and Amy, and the relationship gelled and it worked. So I did do a lot of research. I had his whole case file. I had every deposition, every police report, every transcript. But really, for me, the Bible was the 12 hours of video that I shot of Brian in New York when he was working in the NFL front offices, and the 3 hours that I shot with Justin, and the trip that I took to San Diego. I think some of us on this stage took that trip to sit in on his wrongful conviction class. But listening to Brian for those 12 hours where he told me his life from birth all the way up to the point where we were sitting in that room. And I just needed to listen and feel what he told me, because Brian just doesn't tell you, here are the events. He says, this is how I felt about this, and this was my perception of this event at age 16, at age 17, at age 18. And my job was to really try to feel that and then put it in an order that made sense so that the folks up here could feel those things, so that these folks could feel those things.
This is your first narrative film in something like 10 years. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you'd been doing during that time and how it informed not only your decision to take Brian Banks on as your sort of return to the director's chair, but how it informed the actual movie and your approach to it.
Wow. Okay, 10 years. How much time? You guys good? Nobody's doing anything. I'll give you the cliff notes on it. I was teaching and got drawn to Memphis, Tennessee from some family connections and fell into a neighborhood that shook me awake. The urgency of which you intuited and felt, of which I told the story, was authentic, because I had seen this story happen to kids that I taught, that I cared about, that were thrust into the criminal justice system, and that system, that conveyor belt, is conviction. It's not about getting the truth out. That's what we all think, most of us who come from a privileged, relatively privileged background, affluent background. that the truth is going to come out. It's not that system. That's why the statistic 97% of cases plead out. That means 97% of people are being threatened with a longer sentence if they will just say they're guilty, even when they're not. So we don't even know how many people are innocent or some version and nuanced story that we have never heard in our criminal justice system. And when you feel it personally, when you get close, you want to tell a story about it. That's what we do. We tell stories. And so, look, it's not like I had been in retirement for 10 years. I got sick about 13 years ago, and took me a couple of years to heal. I had a bad concussion, but I was trying to get work. And I just think it was life's way of saying, you got to reinvent yourself, Tom. You got to go experience something. You got to grow a little bit before you tell the next iteration of stories that you're going to tell.
Well, I noticed in the end credits that it said the movie was shot in Tennessee. Is that because of you, or was that some sort of tax incentive? Was it cheaper to do it there? What went into that?
All of this is true, but it's mostly because of the grace of Monica, Shivani, and Amy, who agreed that I presented them with this opportunity. If we're a movie about social justice, why don't we be a version of social justice as we do this movie? And they said yes, as long as we could get, relatively the same savings. So what you may not have noticed is we shot this. The production offices were in one of the most disenfranchised neighborhoods in America, South Memphis, a specific town called Soulsville, believe it or not, true name. And we mentored 30 kids on the movie, young people that I had known through the University of Memphis and a historical black college that I taught at called Des Moines Owen. And that experience, that exposure has changed these kids' lives, and it's changed, I think, our lives. Because we all want to be a part of this uplift. Showbiz is, showbiz is an amazing thing. Storytelling is an amazing thing, but we lock ourselves behind gates, and then we wonder why we get disconnected from audiences. And this was our way of opening a gate and saying, please, we want to feel your experience. We want to learn from you. And if we have something to impart, let's go on this journey together. So now Monica's got, interns, and Amy's got interns in her office, and opportunities are showing up, and we hope that can happen on many more.
Sherri, I read that you also had a personal connection to this story and were really chased it. You really wanted this part. And I'm curious what it was that you responded to, and what kinds of conversations did you have with Tom and the producers to kind of convince them that you were the person for this movie?
When I read the script, I connected to Leomi, who is Brian Banks' mother. Her faith was so strong for her son, and my son at the time was 12 years old, and I said, this could be Brian Banks. By the end of the script that Doug had written, I was in tears, and I said to my agent, you've got to get me an audition. But the very thing that I'm known for, which is comedy, kind of worked against me in this, because they kept saying this lady named Viola. That's what everybody kept saying. Some lady named Viola. That name was being bandied about. And I wasn't able to get an audition. And then I did get an audition, and I didn't hear from anybody for a few weeks. So I didn't think I got it. And then they said, Tom, you were cleaning your computer and you found my tape. You did. Isn't that funny how God works? But I had a FaceTime audition with Tom, and I told him how I advocate for my son who has special needs and how I had to fight for my child. And I had a FaceTime with Monica and Amy, and the same thing. And I knew, and it only takes one person to believe in you. And that was Tom Shadyac, who I just am so grateful for, Monica and Amy, because he's worked with Eddie Murphy. And he wrote a movie for Eddie Murphy, and he's worked with Jim Carrey. And so when he said, I had to sit on Jim, I think I'll have to sit on you, I was like, I've been waiting for somebody to sit on me my whole life. And this was Tom. And so I'm so grateful that he saw, I don't know what he saw, but that he saw something, because I wanted it really badly. Really, really badly. I just connected with Leomi as a mother, as a woman of faith, as an advocate, and a mother who's fearful for her child.
Now, Greg, you've worked in a lot of movies where you've played real people. I mean, Bob Crane, Kennedy. Does that first of all, do you feel an added sense of responsibility when you're playing somebody real? And if so, how does that affect your approach? How does it affect your approach in something like this? And how much contact did you have with the real Justin?
So Justin is, was available to me, kind of early on in the process. He was, and through the process, he and Brian were with us on the set pretty much like every day. There were scenes where Brian would step away because it was what Aldous was going through, or it was just too intense a few times. But Justin was there, and he invited me down to San Diego, and he teaches at the California Western School of Law, and he let me sit in a couple of his classes, and I went to the CIP, California Innocence Project. He was nice enough to let me in there and just hang out with the gang. But no, I don't know. I felt like I liked this story so much, and obviously for the very reasons that I think everybody up here is expressing how much value there is in this film. So I was, taken with all aspects of it. Didn't really know the details of it, and didn't know what the California Innocence Project was and how they had exonerated over 30 people, innocent people, not on technicalities, but truly innocent people who this organization, without Justin ever taking a dime, goes in with these law students and does this. And I was so taken with that. And so I guess there was, of course, I wanted, you want to get some sense of the guy, but there's no obligation. I can say it because Justin isn't here. The entire country doesn't know him. But, I do think that, for me, what was really interesting was that the first thing I saw in their office was just piles of letters, just people saying, please help me. And it's heartbreaking. And you think of him starting at that point, the character, forget the reality, the character starting at that point of truly wanting to help people, truly wanting to reach out and lend a hand. This was a little unusual. Brian was out of jail. He's wearing an ankle bracelet, and he's on parole. So in a way, I think, in talking to Justin, I felt like, the way that it started was, well, this was a guy who, was a bad situation, but my God, he's so much better off than so many other people. And that turn of Brian advocating for himself and Brian making himself known was what was really cool to Justin. So that shift of him was the thing that was fun to play.
Well, I want to thank all of you for coming and talking with us about it. It's a beautiful movie.